The halls of Crestwood High were a labyrinth of noise and chaos, a place where the clatter of lockers and the hum of teenage voices collided in a symphony of adolescent energy. In the midst of it all, Amara Johnson moved like a ghost, her footsteps soft, her presence barely noticed. She was 16, with skin the color of rich cocoa and eyes that held a quiet storm, always cast downward as if searching for something lost in the tiles. Her braided hair was pulled back neatly, and her oversized hoodie seemed to swallow her slight frame, making her even less conspicuous among the vibrant crowds of her peers. Amara was the kind of girl who could slip through a room without a single head-turning, and that's exactly how she liked it. Or at least, that's what she told herself. Crestwood wasn't kind to those who stood out, especially not to someone like her, a black girl in a school where the majority didn't look like her, didn't talk like her, didn't understand her. She wasn't invisible by choice, it was survival. But survival came at a cost, and for Amara, that cost was silence. It wasn't that Amara didn't have a voice. She had thoughts that burned like fire, dreams that stretched beyond the gray walls of Crestwood, and a heart that ached for connection. But every time she opened her mouth, the world seemed to remind her to stay quiet. It started in middle school, when her soft-spoken answers in class were met with snickers, when her attempts to join the popular girls at lunch were rebuffed with cold stares. By the time she reached high school, Amara had learned the art of fading into the background. She sat in the back of every classroom, her head buried in books or her sketchpad, where she poured her soul into intricate drawings of worlds she wished she could escape to. Her teachers called her reserved, her classmates called her weird. But to the trio of girls who ruled Crestwood's social hierarchy, she was something else entirely. A target. Madison Carter, Chloe Evans, and Brooke Larson were the queens of Crestwood, their beauty and confidence a currency that bought them loyalty and fear in equal measure. Madison, with her golden hair and sharp tongue, was the leader, her every word a decree that others scrambled to obey. Chloe, her loyal second-in-command, had a laugh that could cut like glass, and Brooke, the quietest of the three, had a knack for finding weaknesses and exploiting them with surgical precision. Together, they were untouchable, their reign built on whispered gossip, carefully curated Instagram posts, and the unspoken rule that anyone who didn't fit their mold was fair game. Amara, with her quiet demeanor and unassuming presence, was the perfect prey. It began subtly, as it always does. A snide comment in the hallway about Amara's clothes, a giggle behind her back in English class, a pointed stare as she sat alone in the cafeteria. But subtlety didn't last long. By the second month of junior year, the trio had made Amara their project. They called her Shadow, a nickname that spread like wildfire, whispered in the halls and scrawled on her locker in marker. They mocked her for her silence, for her braided hair, for the way she never fought back. Madison would, accidentally, bump into her, sending her book sprawling across the floor, while Chloe recorded it on her phone, the video racking up likes on Snapchat before Amara could even gather her things. Brooke was the cruelest in her own way, slipping notes into Amara's backpack that read things like, "Why are you even here?" or "Nobody wants you around." Each jab was a pinprick, small but deliberate, designed to wear her down. Amara took it all in silence. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't tell a soul. Not her teachers, who barely noticed her anyway, and not her mother, who worked double shifts at the hospital and came home too exhausted to notice the shadows under her daughter's eyes. Amara's father was a mystery, a name she didn't speak, a figure who existed only in the vague stories her mother told her late at night. Stories of a man who was important, but gone. A man who had left them when Amara was too young to remember his face. She didn't have anyone to turn to, so she turned inward, letting the hurt pool in her chest like water in a dam, waiting for the day it would overflow. The bullying escalated in ways that made Amara dread waking up each morning. One day, Madison borrowed Amara's sketchpad during art class and passed it around, her friends laughing at the drawings of fantastical worlds and strong, dark-skinned heroines who looked suspiciously like Amara herself. "What is this, your diary?" Madison sneered, holding up a page for the class to see. "You think you're some kind of princess? Newsflash, Shadow? You're nobody." The laughter burned in Amara's ears, but she didn't respond. She never did. She just took the sketchpad back when Madison tossed it at her, clutching it to her chest like a shield. Another time, Chloe tripped her in the cafeteria, sending her tray of food crashing to the floor. The room erupted in laughter as Amara knelt to clean up the mess, her face burning with shame. Brooke leaned down, pretending to help, and whispered, "You're so pathetic. It's almost sad." Amara didn't look up. She couldn't. If she did, they'd see the tears she was fighting to hold back, but there was one place where Amara felt safe. The library. Tucked away in a corner behind the history section, she could lose herself in books, in stories of people who overcame impossible odds, of heroes who rose from nothing. It was there, one rainy afternoon, that she met Caleb. He was new to Crestwood, a lanky boy with glasses and a nervous smile, who seemed as out of place as she did. He'd been assigned to the library for detention, caught doodling in class instead of taking notes. When he saw Amara sketching in her corner, he didn't laugh or sneer. Instead, he asked, "Can I see?" His voice was soft, curious, not mocking. Amara hesitated, her instincts screaming to protect herself, but something in his eyes made her slide the sketchpad over. He studied her drawings with awe, not judgment, and for the first time in years, Amara felt seen, not as Shadow, but as herself. Caleb became her quiet ally, the only person who noticed the way her shoulders tensed when Madison and her crew walked by. He didn't push her to talk about it, but he was there, sitting with her in the library, sharing his snacks, telling her about his dreams of becoming a comic book artist. "Your drawings are better than mine," he said one day, flipping through her sketchpad. "You've got a whole universe in here. You should do something with it." Amara smiled, a rare thing, but the warmth of his words couldn't erase the cold reality of her days. The bullying didn't stop, and it was getting worse. Madison, Chloe, and Brooke seemed to sense that Amara was slipping through their fingers, finding a spark of strength in Caleb's friendship, and they didn't like it. The tipping point came on a crisp October morning, when the air was thick, with the promise of winter. Amara was walking to school, her head down, her earbuds in, when she felt a sharp tug on her backpack. She turned to see Madison, flanked by Chloe and Brooke, their faces lit with malicious glee. "What's this?" Madison said, snatching one of Amara's earbuds. "Listening to something to drown out how much you suck?" Before Amara could react, Chloe grabbed her backpack and dumped its contents onto the wet pavement. Books, pencils, her precious sketchpad, all of it landed in a puddle. Amara's heart sank as she saw her drawings soak through, the ink bleeding into unrecognizable smears. She dropped to her knees, trying to salvage what she could, while the girls laughed. "Look at her," Brooke said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's practically begging for it." Something snapped in Amara that day. Not outwardly, she didn't scream or fight back, but inside, the dam began to crack. She gathered her things in silence, her hands trembling, and walked away as the girls' laughter echoed behind her. That night, alone in her room, she stared at the ruined sketchpad, her fingers tracing the blurred lines of her creations. She thought of her mother, who always told her to keep her head down and stay strong. She thought of her father, the man she didn't know, the man her mother said was out there doing important things. And for the first time, Amara wondered who he really was. Did he know what she was going through? Would he care? The questions burned, but they also lit a fire in her, a resolve to stop hiding. The next day, Amara went to school with a plan. She wasn't sure what it was yet, But she knew she couldn't keep letting Madison and her friends break her. She started small, speaking up in class when a teacher called on her, her voice shaky but clear. She sat with Caleb at lunch, ignoring the stares from across the cafeteria. And when Madison tried to trip her in the hallway, Amara sidestepped, meeting her eyes for the first time. The look of surprise on Madison's face was fleeting but satisfying. Amara wasn't ready to fight back, not yet. But she was done running. What Amara didn't know was that her small acts of defiance were setting off a chain of events that would change everything. Across town, in a sleek office building with tinted windows, a man sat behind a desk, his phone buzzing with a message he hadn't expected. He was a man of power, a man whose name carried weight in circles Amara couldn't even imagine. And he had just received a call from someone who had seen Amara's name in a school report, a report that mentioned concerns about her well-being. His jaw tightened as he read the details, his mind racing back to a life he'd left behind, a daughter he'd never stopped thinking about. Amara didn't know it, but her father was about to re-enter her life, and when he did, Crestwood High would never be the same. The air in Crestwood High felt different the week after Amara's quiet rebellion began. It wasn't something you could pinpoint, not like a storm cloud or a sudden chill, but it was there, a tension, a shift, like the world was holding its breath. Amara felt it too, though she couldn't explain it. She walked through the halls with her head a little higher, her steps a little steadier, even as Madison, Chloe, and Brooke doubled down on their cruelty. They sensed the change in her, the way she no longer flinched at their words or shrank from their stares, and it infuriated them. To them, Amara was a puzzle they couldn't solve, a girl who should have broken by now but hadn't. So they pushed, harder, their taunts sharper, their actions bolder, unaware that they were digging their own graves. It started with a rumor, one that spread faster than any video Chloe had ever posted. By Monday morning, whispers filled the halls. Amara was a scholarship kid, a charity case, someone who didn't belong at Crestwood. Madison made sure the rumor reached every corner of the school, her voice dripping with mock pity as she told anyone who'd listen, "It's so sad, really. She's only here because someone felt sorry for her." The truth was, Amara's mother had worked tirelessly to afford Crestwood's tuition, sacrificing vacations and new clothes to give her daughter a chance at a better future. But the truth didn't matter to Madison. Lies were her weapon, and she wielded them with precision. By lunchtime, Amara felt the weight of 100 eyes on her, judging, mocking, dismissing. She sat with Caleb in their usual corner, trying to ignore the whispers, but they stung all the same. Caleb, ever her anchor, noticed the tension in her jaw. "They're just words," he said, pushing a bag of chips toward her. "Words from people who don't matter." Amara nodded, but the words felt like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. She wanted to believe Caleb, wanted to believe she was stronger than the rumors, but the doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if she didn't belong? That night she sat on her bed, staring at the photo of her mother on her nightstand, a woman who radiated strength even in her exhaustion. "You're enough," her mother had always said, but Amara wasn't so sure anymore. The bullying reached a new low the next day. During gym class, Madison accidentally threw a volleyball at Amara's head, the impact sending her stumbling to the floor. The gym teacher, distracted by another group, didn't see, but the class did. Laughter erupted, led by Chloe's shrill cackle. Brooke, as always, stayed silent, but her smirk was louder than words. Amara got up, her cheek stinging, and walked off the court without a word. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in front of them since middle school. But her hands shook as she grabbed her bag and headed for the library. Caleb found her there, tucked in her usual corner, her sketchpad open but untouched. "You okay?" he asked, sitting across from her. She didn't answer, just shook her head. "You don't have to take this," he said, his voice firm. "You can tell someone." A teacher, the principal, your mom? Someone. But Amara just looked away. Telling someone meant admitting how much it hurt, and she wasn't ready for that. What Amara didn't know was that someone was already watching. Across the country, in a city of glass and steel, a man named Marcus Kane sat in a boardroom, his phone buzzing with another update. Marcus was a name that commanded respect, a man who had risen from nothing to become one of the most powerful figures in the tech industry, a billionaire whose influence reached into government halls and corporate empires. He was a man of few words, his presence imposing, his dark eyes sharp with the weight of a life hard-lived. But beneath the tailored suits and steely demeanor was a secret he'd carried for 16 years. A daughter he'd left behind. Marcus had been young when Amara was born, too young to handle the responsibilities of fatherhood, too driven to let anything slow him down. He'd left Amara and her mother, promising to come back when he'd made something of himself. He'd kept that promise in his own way, sending money, paying for Amara's school, but he'd stayed away, convinced it was better for her. Until now. The report that landed on Marcus's desk came from a private investigator he'd hired after that first troubling call about Amara. It detailed everything: the bullying, the rumors, the incidents no one had bothered to report to the school. Marcus's hands tightened around the pages, his jaw set as he read about the girls who had made his daughter's life a living hell. He didn't know Amara, not really. He'd seen her only in photos her mother sent, blurry snapshots, of a girl who looked so much like him it hurt. But he knew pain when he saw it, and he knew he couldn't stay away any longer. Marcus arrived in Crestwood on a Friday, his sleek black SUV pulling up to the school just as classes let out. He stepped out, a tall figure in a dark coat, his presence drawing curious glances from students and teachers alike. Amara was in the library when he arrived, unaware that her life was about to change. Marcus met with the principal first, his voice calm but edged with steel as he laid out the evidence. Screenshots of Chloe's videos, copies of Brooke's notes, witness statements from students like Caleb, who had quietly documented the bullying. The principal, a nervous man named Mr. Hargrove, stammered promises to handle it. But Marcus wasn't interested in promises. "You had your chance," he said. "Now it's mine." By Monday, the school was buzzing with rumors of a big shot who'd visited, though no one knew why. Madison, Chloe, and Brooke were called to the principal's office, their confident smirks fading when they saw Marcus sitting there, his eyes cold and unyielding. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He simply laid out the consequences: suspensions, community service, and a formal apology to Amara, recorded and sent to every student who'd seen Chloe's videos. But Marcus wasn't done. He knew suspensions wouldn't teach them anything, not really. So he made a call, pulling strings only a man of his influence could. By the end of the week, Madison's father, a local businessman, found his company under investigation for tax fraud. Chloe's college applications, carefully crafted to showcase her perfect persona, were flagged for review after anonymous tips about her behavior. Brooke's family, who relied on a scholarship fund, learned it had been mysteriously revoked. The girls didn't know it was Marcus, not yet, but they felt the walls closing in. Amara, meanwhile, was still in the dark. She noticed the shift: Madison's absence, Chloe's sudden silence, Brooke's pale face in the halls. But she didn't know why. It wasn't until Friday, when she came home from school, that she found Marcus sitting in her living room talking to her mother. Amara froze, her heart pounding as she took in the man who looked like an older, sharper version of herself. "Amara," her mother said, her voice trembling, "this is your father." The words hit like a tidal wave, and Amara's world tilted. Marcus stood, his eyes soft for the first time, and said, "I'm sorry it took me so long." She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to feel. Anger, relief, confusion, they swirled together, leaving her speechless. Over the next few weeks, Amara learned the truth about her father. His rise from poverty, his sacrifices, his regrets. He didn't try to buy her love with money or promises. He just listened, showing up every day to rebuild what he'd broken. At school, the bullying stopped, not because the girls had changed, but because they were too busy dealing with their own crumbling worlds. Madison's family moved away, Chloe's social media empire collapsed under scrutiny, and Brooke withdrew into a shell, her confidence shattered. Amara didn't gloat. She wasn't that kind of person, but she felt the weight lift, the air clearer, the shadows lighter. With Caleb's encouragement, Amara started sharing her drawings online, her fantastical worlds gaining a small but loyal following. Marcus, proud in a way he couldn't put into words, funded an art program at Crestwood, with Amara as its first student. She wasn't Shadow anymore. She was Amara Johnson, a girl with a voice, a story, and a father who'd finally come home. But for Madison, Chloe, and Brooke, it was too late. They'd crossed a line, and the consequences had found them, not in the halls of Crestwood, but in the lives they thought were untouchable.